You walk into the break room, you haven't said a word yet. You just find the spot where you can see the door, set your coffee down, and stand there, regular face on. Not mad, not anything, just still. Somebody across the room leans over to their coworker. Is he okay? He seems tense. He wasn't tense. He was standing still. And today we're getting into something a lot of Black Gen Xers, folks born roughly 65 to 80, carry around every single day and never even name it. I call it the reflex. Not a personality trait, a reflex. Somewhere between age 5 and 15, a whole generation of Black kids got handed the same invisible software. Scan the room, read the face, keep your hands where people can see them, keep your voice down. And here's the thing, that software is still running, right now, in the background, whether they're in a boardroom or standing in line at the gas station. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe. We do this every week. Okay, here's the setup. Gen X's childhood didn't happen in a vacuum, man. It happened right in the middle of the war on drugs. Researchers at the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice found that during the 1980s, the drug arrest rate for white Americans actually dropped about a third. Meanwhile, the arrest rate for Black Americans shot up nearly 250%. By the end of the decade, Black people were getting arrested for drugs at almost 5 times the rate of white people, even though survey data showed both groups using it about the same rate. So think about that for a second. Think about what an 8-year-old does when the news, the neighborhood, the grown folks around them are all soaked in that same message at the same time. You learn to walk into a store with your hands out of your pockets. You learn to drop your voice or register the second a manager walks by. You learn to smile a half-second early just so nobody gets a free second to decide something about your face first. You learn to laugh loud enough that a whole room exhales. You learn where the exits are without ever deciding to look for them. None of that is personality. That's software that got installed. Now, fast forward. Same guy, 30 years later, walking into a 9 a.m. status meeting. Sets his laptop down, doesn't say much before it starts, checks his phone. And Dana, over in the corner, leans to the person next to her. Is he in a bad mood? He wasn't in a bad mood. He was doing exactly what he did in that break room at 12 years old. Same software, different building. And look, there's actual research on this. Public health researcher Margaret Hicken and her team studied thousands of Black adults across Chicago and Detroit. Here's what they did. They asked people how often they mentally prep for potential discrimination, monitor their own tone and body language around white folks, avoid spaces where they expect to get judged. And here's what they found. That pattern, they call it vigilant coping, showed up constantly, and it was tied to worse sleep, higher blood pressure, even in people who hadn't had a single openly racist encounter that whole week. So what that means for you is this. The alertness isn't a mood. It's a body that got trained early to treat ordinary rooms like they might turn on it. So think about that from your side of the table for a second. You start noticing it in other people. The little stiffen when you walk in a bit too quiet. The extra cheerful, hey, how's it going, that comes out a beat too fast. The way a stranger's eyes flick to your hands before they even hit your face. You're not imagining that. You're watching somebody else's nervous system do the exact thing yours got trained to manage. So what'd you learn to do? You learned to manage other people's fear of you as a full-time, unpaid job. Psychologists call it vigilant coping. And Hicken's research ties it straight to chronic stress, disrupted sleep, elevated blood pressure over years, not because anything dramatic happened, just because the body can't always tell the difference between a real threat.
And constantly bracing for one. But here's the part people miss. At home, with people who actually know him, that same guy drops the performance, stops smiling early, stops softening the voice, and sometimes the people closest to him ask, "What's wrong? You seem off." Nothing's wrong. He's just not doing the job right now. The rest is what gets misread as broken. Now let's get into the perception itself, because this part is wild. Psychologist B. Keith Payne ran a study back in 2001 that's been repeated dozens of times since. Here's the method. Show people a photo of a black or white face, then flash an image right after, sometimes a gun, sometimes a harmless tool like a wrench. Ask them to name it, fast. Here's the finding. After seeing a black face, people were a lot more likely to misidentify the harmless tool as a weapon, and they did it faster, more confident about it too. Translate that? It was never really about how a black man carries himself. It's a bias sitting in the eye of the person watching him, one that fires in a fraction of a second, before either person's done a single thing. This is where I've got to bring in black women, because they're carrying a related layer, but a different one. Back in 2017, Georgetown Law's Center on Poverty and Inequality put out a study called Girlhood Interrupted. Researchers surveyed adults and consistently found that black girls, some as young as 5, got rated as needing less protection, less nurturing, less comfort than white girls the exact same age. Follow-up interviews with black women and girls found they routinely felt treated as older, tougher, less innocent starting back in elementary school. One participant said it plain, white girls are always innocent. Black Gen X women were living that bias decades before anybody put a name on it, expected to be strong, composed, unshaken at an age when nobody's supposed to have to be any of those things yet. Before I keep going, I've been working on something on the side, a short companion guide breaking down every study in this video, plain language, so you can go read the source material yourself. And to everybody watching sharing this one, genuinely thank you. All right, let's talk about the version of this that shows up at work. It's called code switching, adjusting your speech, your tone, your whole vibe depending on who's in the room. Researchers Courtney McClunney, Katharina Robotham, Serenity Lee, Richard Smith, and Miles Durkee ran a 1919 Harvard Business Review study on black professionals. And here's the part that surprises people. Code switching often gets rewarded, better performance reviews, but it costs something real. It drains mental energy, and over time, it's linked to straight-up burnout. And it gets misread by coworkers as, oh, he's just more relaxed with his friends. Like the work version is the real him, and the other one's an act. It's the opposite. Both versions are him. One of them is just doing less labor. Now here's a piece I want you to sit with. All of it, the scanning, the managed voice, the early smile, the code switch, falls under one bigger pattern, hypervigilance. And that's real, not a vibe, not an aura, not he just has a presence. It's a documented, measurable stress response with a paper trail in public health journals going back decades. So now let me pull all this together, because this is where the whole thing lives. A whole generation of black kids came up during a decade where the arrest data alone tells you how the culture saw them, and they adapted the only way kids know how, by building a set of behaviors to stay safe in rooms that weren't guaranteed to be safe. Decades later, those same behaviors, the quiet entrance, the composed face, the careful tone, get run through a totally separate bias, the one Payne's research measured, primed to read ambiguous behavior from a black face as more threatening than the exact same behavior from anybody else. Black women carry an added layer on top of that, adultified before they were even old enough to understand why it was happening to them. And the professional version of all this, code switching, quietly taxes the same people every single day at work. None of these are separate stories. They're one story, showing up in 5 different rooms. Here's the part that matters. If you still choose to perform the calm, composed version of yourself in certain rooms, that's not you being fake, and it's not something to be ashamed of. It's a skill you built to survive conditions you didn't create. But the misread was never a flaw in you. It was a flaw in the lens. The room walked in scared. You just walked in. Quick thing before I go. That companion guide I mentioned's linked below if you want the full source list. Thank you for watching, for sharing this one. It actually helps more than you'd think. And that video on the screen right now, that's your next one. Tap it.